beginning. To once again feel the wind upon my flesh, to hear the sounds of birds, the soft laughter of life, instead of the hissing flames as they consumed mortal flesh. The cursed agony of those cursed into the flames where you burn forever, your flesh never adjusting to the pain of the fire's insatiable hunger. Each time the fires touch you, it is as if your flesh is feeling its fiery tongue for the first time. How long had it been that I have had to burn? How long ago was it that that fool angel had failed me? I have been free of the flames for nearly 1,200 years, though I have burned and been tormented for over 1,000. I have wandered the world not quite dead, yet not truly alive. All the pleasures of humanity denied me. I hunger, yet food does nothing to appease it. I thirst, yet no amount of water can quench it. I do not age. I cannot get sick or die. No matter how much I pray for death, it eludes me. It flees from me as if I might infect it with the life it takes away. Is this some added torment or a second part of hell that I must endure? I lust and I crave a man's love so deeply, yet no man I take into my bed can satisfy me. My lust seems to devour and burn like the fires that tormented me for so long. I wonder where that fool is now. Does he wonder the world of men who are lost and tormented as me? Has he suffered as I have suffered? He who let the dark ones take me. I know I paid the price for taking my life. The foolish girl I was all those centuries ago. But if Ma'alik would not have forgotten me in his lust as I pleaded to the Great One, then I would not have perished. I think of my father. How did he leave this world? Does he wander cursed like me, or has he found peace? Alas, only Ma'alik would know these things. I know of my mother, for I heard her screams as the flames touched her. Forgive me, for just the memory of it chills me. Ma'alik has eluded me all these centuries. I have searched for him. How I have longed to see his beautiful face, his flawless brown skin that seemed to glow as if he held some inner light that every other being on earth lacks. How I have longed to see his beautiful face, his flawless brown skin that seemed to glow as if he held some inner light that every other being on earth lacks. His eyes, black as night, yet you could see your very soul in them. His scent, the sweet smell of a newborn babe. Yes, I have never forgotten him. Ma'alik, the liar. Ma'alik, the foul one who lusted over an Egyptian princess, a girl who had barely reached womanhood, and let her die. Yes, I wanted him. I wanted to rip his heart from his chest and let it burn as I have burned. To smell it as his flesh curled and cooked until it was nothing but a blackened lump that still seemed to beat, but still fed him pain and torment. I have heard rumors of him over the centuries. I have heard legends of a beautiful demon that fought in wars beside men, who slaughtered priests and seduced women and murdered. Are all of these legends true? Some I doubt, but I can never be sure. For the longest time, I had lost his trail. People no longer gossiped in taverns about a strange demon that walked about, claiming to be an angel. There had been no more sightings of him. I had given up hope of even finding him until I found a book, one written by one of Ma'alik's lovers. It was a poor fool of an unremarkable woman named Sandra. I had to know if that book was true, for it spoke correctly of my death all those years ago. Did it accurately chronicle that wretch's life as well? If it did, then he still loved me. He has been tormented by me, the Egyptian girl who died in his arms ages ago in my father's garden. So I find myself here, this night, standing before the author's door. It seems she has done well from writing Ma'alik's story, for she lived in the rich neighborhood of Manhattan. Her home was the size of a small palace. Security guarded her home. The mortals patrolled, pretending to keep watch as they walked around lost in their minds. I wonder how she will take my presence this late at night. Will she think I'm a crazed fan? She will probably think I am mad, but I will make her listen. If she knew Ma'alik as well as she claimed, then she will see the same ageless, tormented mortal that I am, that Ma'alik was. Sandra. Sandra sat in her study while her husband slept in their room alone. She was lost in some world she created, some kind of fantasy that would be her next book. She hoped it would sell as much or better than Ma'alik the Fallen. It had been 2 years since she had published that book. 2 years since her dear friend Melissa had passed, and 2 years since she had last seen Ma'alik. She had visited Melissa's grave today, as she did every week, while never forgetting to place fresh flowers upon her grave. She could not help but weep every time she visited her old friend. She would sit and talk to her for hours as she remembered Ma'alik and the times the three of them spent together. For though Ma'alik the Fallen had sold well, no one believed her when she told them it was a true story. The media buzzed about her losing her mind. The religious community accepted her with the same grace as they would anyone who was crazy. They accepted her with the same exaggerated kindness they give to mentals who might pose a threat to them. Sandra wondered where Ma'alik was now. It pained her that even her husband doubted her. This being her second marriage, she wondered if it would end like her first, for she seemed to be repeating history. Her husband always slept alone, cold and starving for her attention. But she couldn't help it. She needed to write. She needed to get lost in her worlds where she was God. It was her escape from this life. She lived and suffered with the characters she created. She got lost in their adventures as they fought fearsome creatures and journeyed across forbidden lands. She couldn't pull herself away. Her real life wasn't bad. She was richer than she could dream of being. Ma'alik's story sold all around the world. She had traveled to meet fans in different countries. She met with foreign leaders who loved the book. There was even a buzz about a movie. But she felt guilty. Where was Ma'alik? He could prove to the world that she wasn't mad. He could share in the glory that was rightfully his. Most of all, she just missed him. He confirmed in her that there was a God, a heaven, an ultimate resting place for those who had strived to do good. He gave her life a little more meaning than the mundane existence she was used to living. She longed to be in his presence, for he seemed to take away every bit of pain. Damn, Ma'alik, where are you? It is almost like he disappeared from the earth. Did he finally find the peace he sought? Was he forgiven, and after all these centuries able to dance again in his creator's garden? Sandra sighed and sipped her cold coffee as she stared down at page 482 of her new novel, on which she was stuck. Her head hurt, and she knew she couldn't write any more tonight. Maybe she would go to Heaven's Perch, like she had done almost every other night. She would sit there, hoping Ma'alik would appear like he did the first time they met, 2 years ago. He used to call her Beautiful One. How I longed for him so. A soft knock on her study door brought her back from her memories. Was it 3 a.m. already? She asked herself as she looked down at her watch. It was barely past 1 a.m. Her butler was early. Normally, he didn't disturb her. Come in, she said wearily. The door creaked open and an old black man entered. His hair was all gray with only a few patches of black sprinkled in. His eyes were kind and soft. He was a good man who just drank too much, but he never let it interfere with his work. He was honest and had no family. All he had was her. I'm sorry to disturb you, madam, he said. Sandra could tell he was nervous, but this was unusual for him. "It's okay, Bradley. What is it?" she asked. Bradley sighed. "There's a strange young woman downstairs, and she claims to know Ma'alik personally," he answered. He looked at Sandra questionably, but she ignored his look. She couldn't breathe for a moment. Could she really know him, or was she just another crazed fan? Lord knows she ran into a lot of them. However, none ever showed up at her house, and the fact that Bradley was spooked made her heart start to pound against her chest. "Shall I call the police, madam? She could be one of those crazies like at your book signing," Bradley said, acknowledging that her book had a cult following. They called themselves the Watchers. They tried to kidnap her at one of her appearances and question her about Ma'alik as if she knew where he was. "No, I will see her myself, Bradley. But radio security and have them stand by just in case." Bradley nodded. Clearly he thought seeing her was a bad idea, but he left to go to radio security. Sandra left her study and slowly walked to the guest area where all guests were escorted. Her heart beat as if it sought to escape from her chest. She entered the guest waiting room and finally caught her breath. Before her stood a beautiful young girl. She seemed Middle Eastern, maybe African. Her skin was the color of honey. Her long hair looked like flawless ebony silk. She had eyes the shape of almonds, a deep brown that defied mortal beauty. Every feature in her face was perfectly shaped. Her slender body seemed hard and strong. She wore faded blue jeans, a long black shirt covered by a heavy jacket. She had a white scarf, like Muslim women wear to cover their hair, except hers only covered the top of her head, leaving the ends of her beautiful ebony hair to fall perfectly down her slender back. "Are you Sandra Landell, the writer of Ma'alik, the Fallen?" the girl asked. Her voice was like a fading melody in Sandra's ears. She seemed almost familiar, like Sandra had seen her before or had known her. Something about this girl seemed different. Her beautiful, soft brown skin seemed cold, as if life barely touched her. Her young eyes seemed timeless, too old and had seen too much pain and suffering for one so young. "Yes, do I know you? I swear I have seen you before," Sandra asked. She could hear several of her security coming into the guest area of her house. The girl smiled. Her beauty filled the room. Yet again, something seemed not quite alive about her. "Is she sick?" Sandra thought to herself. "Maybe you truly have spoken with that fool Ma'alik, since you described me quite well in your book," the girl said. She paused to let her words sink in. Sandra went pale as those words hit her. This girl? Could it truly be Semia reborn? Sandra was dizzy. Sandra's security entered. Several armed men with their weapons drawn and pointed at the girl. "Yes, Sandra, I am Semia, and I seek Ma'alik," she said with the same beautiful smile that never left her face. Sandra sat in her study across from Semia, sipping fresh coffee that Bradley had brought her. Most of her security went back to their patrols around her property after she explained to them all was well. Yet 2 of them still lingered in the hall outside of her study. It frustrated her that they did not listen to her, but she figured Bradley asked them to stay. Meanwhile, her husband slept soundly. Sandra swore he could sleep through a tornado. Semia stared at Sandra as if studying her. "Do you want some coffee or something to drink?" Sandra asked. There was a longing in Semia's eyes that surprised Sandra, almost as if Semia desired more than anything to drink something. "No, it would do me no good. It would not fulfill my thirst. I would just be tormenting myself," Semia replied. Sandra was curious. This girl certainly looked like Semia as Ma'alik described her. If it truly was her, she couldn't really call her a girl, for she was older than anyone who walked the earth, save for Ma'alik. Or were there other angels and immortals like Semia, Sandra hoped immortal was a good way to describe her, for she had no idea what Semia should be considered. Yet she had so many questions to ask her. Sandra felt the same odd excitement she felt when Ma'alik began to tell her his story back at the monastery after they had met at Heaven's Perch. Sandra stood up, walked over to a shelf, and pulled her old twin tape recorders from a drawer. These were the same ones she had used with Ma'alik. Her heart raced as she touched them. I hope I'm not fooling myself, she thought. She longed so badly to have some connection again with Ma'alik that she truly hoped this was Semia. She believed this girl, if just to appease her longing. She blew the dust off the old recorders, popped in 2 new tapes, and sat back down in front of Semia, who never took her eyes from Sandra. Sandra turned her webcam to face Semia and activated it, so it would record everything on video as well as audio. Finally, Sandra turned back to Semia and hit the record button. Sandra smiled at the familiar sound of the tapes clicking. What would fulfill your thirst, Semia? And why does it torment you? Sandra asked. Semia was silent for a moment. Is this how you did it with Malik? Semia asked. Sandra nodded. Semia took a deep breath. I guess you want my story then, Semia asked. Before Sandra could answer, Semia continued. Unlike Ma'alik, I was born here on Earth. I was human, a princess of Egypt. I died, Sandra, because Ma'alik failed me. Because of his lust, I burned in the fires of hell for over 1,000 years. I do not know how I got my body back, for it should have rotted to dust, but my body seems to be alive. But not completely. I can taste food, drink, but no matter how much I eat or how much I drink, I am still starved. My body is still parched. It seems I exchanged the fires of hell for an existence that mocks life here. Let me show you. Semia picked up a sharp letter opener from Sandra's desk. Sandra leaned away. Semia slowly placed the sharp point in the center of her open palm and thrust down hard. The blade went through her hand and came out the other side. Sandra yelped in dismay. Semia smiled and winced softly as she withdrew the blade. Blood splattered on Sandra's pants, but she was so transfixed as she watched the wound close quickly until there was not even a trace of the wound that should have been there. There was not even a scar or a drop of blood. Sandra gulped. I believe you now, Semia, she said in a shaky voice. Semia smiled and said, Good. Now let me begin my story in Egypt. And after I tell it to you, then can you tell me where I might find Ma'alik? Sandra nodded, even though she had no idea where to find Ma'alik. Even if Sandra did know, she doubted she would tell Semia. Semia seemed to have ill will towards Ma'alik, but Sandra wanted desperately to hear Semia's story. Semia took a deep breath, almost as if it pained her to remember her life before Ma'alik. Then she turned to Sandra